Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my channel. On this particular video, we're going to be working on an SAT question, and my channel is about everything STEM related. So I'm focusing on an SAT style question that involves the use of algebra as well as the understanding of solving a particular variable in terms of another variable. So in this particular question, we have if a raised to the power of -1/2 equals x, where a is greater than 0 and x is greater than 0. Whenever you have a question that already tells you upfront a is greater than 0, x is greater than 0, as much as that information could be like very little or it's like too much detail, that's to tell you that is very, very important. Because when you start solving, you have to take into account, and when you want to put your final answer, you have to take that into account. I'm mentioning it so that whenever you have questions where certain things are specifically mentioned, you should know mentally that this information has a value, has a need. They're not going to give you information that has absolutely no need whatsoever. So that's something you should know. So a is greater than 0 and x is greater than 0 is the same thing as saying a is a positive value, only a positive value, by the way. So it's a positive value, so that's like 0.1 and above. That's just like an approximation. And b is also, x is also a positive value. So you cannot get 0, so a cannot equal 0 and a cannot equal a negative number. So both a and x are basically positive values. So that's what that is saying there. So which of the following equations give a in terms of x? So we're supposed to solve for a in terms of x, or you can also say we're supposed to make a the subject of formula. So we have this now, a raised to the power of 1/2 equals x. In order for us to be able to isolate a or solve a in terms of x, since we have the left side of the equation is raised to the power of -1/2, the way we can solve it is by squaring both sides. So whatever we're going to do to the left hand side of the equation, we're going to do to the right part of the equation. So you have a raised to the power of -1/2 all squared equals to x all squared. So that's the same thing as a raised to the power of -1/2, right, multiplied by 2. Because whenever you have, for example, if you have a squared is the same thing as saying a 2 times 2. If you have x 1/4 all cubed is the same thing as saying x 1/4 times 3. So what you end up with x is x 3/4. That is like an example of how things are. So you have a is raised to the power of -1/2 multiplied by 2. That is equals to x squared. So what you end up with is a raised to the power of -1/2 times 2. You can cancel out this, you can cancel out this. So what you end up with would be a raised to the power of -1 equals x squared. So you end up with 1 over a. So a raised to the power of -1 is the same thing as 1 over a. So that's literally the inverse, right? If you're asked for the inverse of -1, if you're asked for the inverse of x, is the same thing as saying 1 over x. And 1 over x can also be written as x raised to the power of -1. That's the same thing we're doing in the previous page for a. So yeah, just wanted to mention, like, these are some key things that could make you either get the answer correctly or not get the answer correctly. And we don't want a situation where you could avoid missing a problem because of some basic math techniques. It would be great for you not to miss a problem, because all of this lead to basic math formula and skills are very, very important, especially when you're doing exams that you need to also work well with the time that you're given. So you have a raised to the power of negative 1 is same thing as 1 over a. So that's, by the way, I'm going to continue. So 1 over a equals x squared, right? And we're supposed to solve for our goal is to solve for a, so we can just basically cross multiply that, and you have x squared a equals 1, and what you end up with would be a equals 1 over x squared, right? Because we isolated it, so we can yeah, so that we did that. So basically we did like divided by x squared here, divided by x squared here, cancel this out, and you have a equals 1 over x squared. So the first option for this particular question, a equals 1 over the square root of x, does not work. The B works, that's good. We can look at C, does not work. We can look at D, does not work. And I just wanted to quickly mention something. You know how we had a greater than 0, and I explained that, and that for a and x in this question, they are both positive values. That makes sense, right? Because we don't want a situation where if it is not mentioned that x has to be greater than 0, if we had x equals to 0 here, that's going to be undefined, because a equals 1 over x squared whenever x equals to 0, for example, is going to give us a equals 1 over 0 squared. 1 over 0 squared is 1 over 0, and that's undefined. So that's why, like, important information is good like that. Like, and again, in this second option, if our answer was C equals a, C equals a equals the square root of x, the square root of a negative number, which is for sure not greater than 0, because only numbers greater than 0 are positive. That's gonna cause a disconnect in the usage of a square root, just like you cannot divide anything by 0. So that's why it's important for you to actually pay attention to some of the information that is given. And I do believe with time, with practice, you're gonna be able to do it. I mean, this is not something that you can do. Basically, you can do it by God's grace. I wish you guys all the very best, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Make sure you watch the next video as well. Salam.